SuperTalk Mississippi media production.
If you're feeling anxious about your investments with all the economic volatility and chaos in Washington, tune in to SuperTalk Jackson on Wednesdays from 9 to 10 a.m. and Sundays from 8:30 to 9:30 a.m. for Element Wealth Radio with Jeremy Nelson. Learn more at myelementwealth.com.
This is Gerard Gibert, and thank you for listening to MidDays here on SuperTalk Mississippi.
MidDays with Gerard Gibert is on the air. MidDays with Gerard Gibert is powered by C-Spire. Power your home or business with C-Spire Fiber. To learn more, visit supertalk.fm/C-Spire. C-Spire Fiber powers SuperTalk Mississippi. Get ready to go beyond the headlines and join a meaningful conversation with people from around the state. Hello. You're listening to MidDays with Gerard Gibert here on SuperTalk Mississippi.
Everyone, and welcome to MidDays, SuperTalk Mississippi. I'm your host, Gerard Gibert, along with Rhino in the Element Wealth Studio, guiding you through the middle of your day with facts, fodder, and fine music. Morning there, Rhino.
Howdy.
All right, don't forget, we're all going to be over at the Pearl River Resort in Philadelphia tomorrow. We're highlighting the incredible partnership between Mississippi Farm Bureau and the Mississippi Food Network through their Farmers Feeding the Hungry initiative. Catch Mornings with Richard Cross, a Middays with moi, Sports Talk Mississippi, and then Thunder and Lightning Live, bringing you a day of inspiration, information, and celebration. That's coming up tomorrow. I'm going to head over to the Dancing Rabbit Golf Club, Pearl River Resort. Looking forward to that. But today it's 100, day 100. Of the president's term number 2, 47th president of these United States. It's just fascinating, just consuming the various analyses, depending on which side of the aisle one is on, as far as their perspective of the first 100 days.
Well, I mean, if you watch CNN or MSNBC or any of those, then you've basically gone week to week to week with, oh, no, this is a constitutional crisis. It's the end of democracy. Wait, forget all about that. That's nothing. This is the constitutional crisis. It's the end of democracy. Oh, wait, that was nothing. This today is the constitutional crisis.
Oh, geez. That's absolutely true. And so, thus, as you have described it rather aptly, the hyperbole, it just fails to impress. It doesn't really have any influence or impact. It's just crying wolf, sky's falling garbage, but they're experts at that. I think, though, if we looked at the first 100 days, I'll just recap a couple of things that comes to mind. The first would be the border. How could you ignore that and not put that at the top of the list? And once again, as the president told us during the campaign, we don't need more laws. We just need a new president, one that actually believes the border should be closed and that the nation has the right and, honestly, the obligation to maintain its sovereignty. There is none when the border's wide-ass open. So you got to give that to him. I mean, he comes in, he puts people in place, but more importantly, I really do think it's just the message. It's the message coming from the commander-in-chief. You're not welcome here illegally. You want to come into this country legally? We're all over that. But not illegally. And by the way, you cartels, you human traffickers, you sex traffickers, you fentanyl smugglers, you ain't welcome at all. That's pretty simple. Pretty straightforward. I mean, it's just common sense. But the application of that concept, common sense, was that even possible in the 4-year Biden administration? Doesn't feel like it. Heck, I think we were just impressed if he didn't go to bed by 6 o'clock, didn't put a lid, as they say. Oh my gosh! So you got at least
6 might as well have been midnight.
That's true. So I think you have to put that at the top of the list. So there's been some. You don't see a lot about this, but there have been some cuts to the regulatory assault we saw during the first 4 years under Joe Biden. And by the way, we all pay for these onerous regulations. Those have to be somehow absorbed and ultimately passed on, at least to some degree, to consumers. And so we've been bearing the economic brunt of those misguided regulatory actions by the prior administration. This president believes in a 1 in for 10 out deregulation rule, and that ultimately will save us money. Then we've got the recognition, got to start with that this nation is blessed with abundant natural resources. Some estimates peg the figure at $45 trillion of natural resources. We're talking mainly about, fossil fuels. Don't say that loud, right? You'll be hung in the town square in some circles. Unbelievable. $45 trillion, and those are accessible with these innovative horizontal drilling and fracking technologies, mining technologies as well. All, of course, are an output of capitalism. Somebody made money creating those technologies. They solved a problem with innovation. Imagine that. So these executive orders really have opened up a treasure chest. And just so you know, folks, you're probably enjoying at least some stability in the price of gas. But really, these relaxing, shall we say, of fossil fuels regulations by the Trump administration really haven't even kicked in yet. So, and it's still not clear to what extent the industry will take advantage of additional opportunities to explore and produce, because that drives the price down, and that's not necessarily in their best interest. It's just a matter of them doing the complex math on, okay, we can sell more, but at a lower price. How does that fare versus selling less at a higher price? I mean, that's the exercise they go through. Let's talk about draining the swamp. This is probably my favorite one, Rhino, because, as you know, no secret, I'm not a fan of this work-from-home garbage. I never have been. I think it's a joke, honestly. And then when we found out, what was it, the IRS building, this giant structure, was just empty. The only people you could find were the people who dealt in with the break rooms and the janitors or the maintenance people or some minimal amount of people that had not squat to do with the Internal Revenue Service's mission. So fewer than 10%. We got about 2.5 million federal workers. We're working full-time in the office. Fewer than 10%. 90% sitting their butts at home because of the COVID stuff. So this president said, you're going back to the office or you're going to be terminated. That's the way it should be. Now, we've seen many private companies follow suit on this too, Rhino, which is a good thing. Even companies you would think, like Facebook, you'd think Mark Zuckerberg, and especially when you consider that kind of work, a lot of that sort of work can be done independently, although I think you're shaking your head. I'm going to agree with you, having done that for a living at one point. Man, when you're creating this technology, you got to talk to other people. You can't do that in a vacuum. You end up with a crappy product, what you end up with.
Because just the simple notion of bouncing an idea off of a colleague.
No doubt.
If you have the spark of an idea while you're walking your dog, the likelihood of you then finishing the walk with your dog, going home, making sure you didn't forget to take out the trash. All right, what was that idea? I got to text so-and-so about it. And then you got to type up the text or dial them up and get them to answer. And just the likelihood of that falling through the cracks is much higher than you're at the office. Oh, yeah, I need to tell so-and-so about this idea. And then you go get coffee, and so-and-so's getting coffee. Oh, so-and-so had an idea. I need to run it by you.
How many great things have happened just from what you described there? We used to say around the water cooler, right? I completely agree. So he said, you're going back to work or we're going to fire you. So the bureaucracy has been trimmed by more than 280,000 employees and contractors as a result of buyouts, performance standards. And this has saved the taxpayers a lot of money, but more importantly, you just feel like that maybe we're getting some degree of our money's worth as a result of just seeing them back at the office and really shedding a lot of the dead weight. We've also pulled out of the old Paris Climate Accord again. A couple of other things as well. But next, it's David Livingston, Executive Director of the Mississippi Loggers Association. Stay with us. This segment of Middays with Gerard Gibert is brought to you by Covington County Hospital in Collins, where your health matters.
We're rolling. Middays with Gerard Gibert.
What? This is so
awesome. On SuperTalk, Mississippi.
If you want to drive a big limousine, I'll buy the longest one you've ever seen. I'll buy you tall, tall trees and all the waters in the seas. I'm a fool.
Welcome back, everyone. It is Middays. We are in the Element Well studio today. Now it's David Livingston, Executive Director of the Mississippi Loggers Association. Hey, David, good to see you, man. Thanks for coming in.
Oh, thank you. Good to see y'all this morning.
All right, tell us how the industry in Mississippi is doing. I know it's a pretty big industry in our state. We're blessed with lots of natural resources that make logging a very viable economic endeavor.
Yes, right now we've over the past several years had a lot of new investment in new mills and all, particularly sawmills in the state, which has been a big help for our landowners in the state of Mississippi and our loggers. Was in a meeting earlier this morning with some guys with the Huber Engineered Woods. They're getting ready to come online next year up there at Sugar Lock with that new OSB plant there, which is going to be a big help as well. So, overall we're doing really, really good. Just still struggling in the pulpwood side of things of having enough homes to send that product.
Okay. So the Trump administration has relaxed some of the regulations, right, with respect to where timber can be harvested. What does that mean to Mississippi?
We have, I think it's 3 national forests in the state of Mississippi, maybe 4, I can't remember. But at any rate, lots of timber on it that has been neglected over the last 25 years. It's really been a decline in the amount of timber they've been harvesting off of those due to environmental concerns as well as frivolous lawsuits that were brought against the U.S. Forest Service to stop those timberlands from being harvested and managed in a sustainable manner. So with this, it's going to open that up to where they can get back in there to manage those forests and do the proper things that they need to do to keep the forest healthy. I always say, one of the main things is that a green forest will not burn like a dead forest, like what we see out in California.
Okay.
And what we're seeing from the big bug epidemic that we had in the drought from 23 and into 24. So, it's a cycle just like anything else. And those trees, if you don't cut them, they're going to die. I mean, there's no way to stop it. So with the knowledge that we have of growing trees and replanting trees and all that, we will never run out of them, but we've got to take care of the ones we got, or it creates other problems for us.
Okay. So will this provide some opportunities that didn't exist before, because we could get on these lands and do some, I guess, limited harvesting?
Right. It's kind of a double-edged sword in the fact that, that forest land needs to be managed just like anybody else. But the big issue is that we really don't have the infrastructure here to purchase and buy the existing timber that we already have.
Okay.
Primarily in that pulp sector, anything that's used for pulpwood or for OSB, just like the plant there at Huber. We don't have enough of those facilities. Pellet plants, anything like that uses low-cost wood, from the plantation thinnings and from the tops of the trees. We just don't have enough outlets for that wood with the private landowners that we have in the state now. When you open that up on the national forest, that just crowds an already saturated market. So, great thing that we can get back in there and try to manage them, but over the period of time, for one reason or another, we've lost infrastructure in the state as far as our mills. And when I say infrastructure, I'm basically talking about our mills and stuff to be able to consume that wood.
What about the lagging effects, David, of the drought that we had, a couple of years ago? And, I mean, it was quite noticeable to anybody across the state, just the amount of timber that just didn't make it.
Yes, we lost a lot of timberland across the state. The effects that we're seeing now, we still have a lot of hardwoods that sometimes it takes that hardwood tree 2 to 3 years to die,
really?
For it to cycle out.
Okay.
We're still seeing some mortality in the hardwood sector of it, but also it's created another problem with the brown spot needle blight. It's very prevalent right now across the state. You can see it, and you look at the trees, and they look like they are dying. Most of the time, thank goodness that the needle blight does not kill the tree, but it does stress that tree, and it could lead to mortality and another beetle outbreak. And I think this is all results from the drought, from them being under stress. It's just opening them up to other diseases.
Well, I've noticed that. I'm glad you explained that. I mean, because you see kind of drooping brown needles, but at the same time you see new sprouts of green needles and the little, I guess, buds that create even more. It's like, well, the tree doesn't seem to be dead, but why has it got all this brown growth on it?
Right, it's called the brown spot needle blight, and it's a fungus and all. That's created from lack of burning from the dropped leaves. It's a mold spore.
Okay,
so it's just one of those cause and effects, I believe, that may be an after effect of the drought that we're still dealing with. So, and we still got a lot of acres that have not been able to be cleaned up and cleared up and reforested just simply because of the cost. And here again, most of that wood would have been considered pulpwood or low value wood, and we just didn't have the markets to sell that wood into. To get rid of it, to get it cleaned up so that the landowner can get it replanted.
What about the president's tariff policies, David? How's that affecting our logging industry?
It really hasn't trickled down to us as of yet. Some of our mills are seeing an effect of that because they sell into foreign markets, have a lot of export that go into foreign markets, and of course they're being hit with that tariff on that. But on the other hand, I'll use pulp for an example, and this is one of the reasons why we've lost so many of our pulp mills in the past 20 years is that in 2024 we imported $3.88 billion, that's with a B, dollars worth of fluff pulp, got brought back into the country to be made into paper products, but we've shut down hundreds of paper mills. So, and they're keeping the paper factory open part of it. They're just shutting down the processing part from turning the wood into pulp to make the paper.
I see.
So they're bringing in the baled fluff pulp to make the paper out of.
Okay.
And that's just one example. It's happening with structural panel. Of course, the big thing everybody was talking about was the softwood lumber, and that's a big deal. But as a whole, it's even a bigger picture than that. So I don't know if it's going to work. I don't think anybody really knows, but I think it's just a tool in his toolbox, and he's trying to bring awareness to get some change, to get a more even playing field. Because when we're competing against, and I'll use pulp because that's the one I'm most familiar with and one I've done the most research on here lately, when you're competing against a country that has no environmental standards on their meal like we do here, we haven't had a paper mill built in the United States in almost 40 years. Well, there's a reason for that. It's not cost effective when you can take down an existing mill here, move it overseas, put it back together, and make the same product and then bring it back in. So, and the scary thing about that is we're talking about what the president's trying to do. It all kind of ties together with trying to fix our forest and get them managed and everything. The Paradise Fire, I was told out there that was out west last year in California, the smoke from that one fire done away with 20 years of environmental regulations that we have in the United States. Just that one forest fire. So that's the importance of being able to manage our forest.
I see.
But if we don't have the mills to manage our forest, we don't have to have a place to do that. It's kind of a vicious circle there.
Need a balance.
That's right.
Somewhat. Well, I didn't realize that no pulp mills built. What'd you say, 40 years?
In almost 40 years, correct. We've had no pulp mills, but there's been existing mills that have shut down here. I forget what the number is in the past 20 years, like 177 paper mills, something like that. I can't remember the exact number that have shut down. Recently, we've had a bunch of them, within the past 10 years. We had GP shut down the Crossett Mill and them. And I understand it. They're in business to make money, and they've got to make money.
Sure.
And in order to do that, they got to do whatever they got to do to survive. And if we're so tight on environmental regulations and everything here that we can't manage our forest to bring and have a place to haul that wood to, they've got to go somewhere else to where they can do it because they're in the paper making business.
Man.
I mean, it just makes sense.
So does that mean then that we ship the lumber elsewhere for turning into paper through these paper and pulp mills?
Well, no, they're actually harvesting it in those countries, like Canada and Brazil, or they have vibrant forest industries. Brazil, those are the top two producers of pulp back into the United States. Brazil grows the eucalyptus really, really fast, and they're bringing it back in. And they can do that cheaper than we can grow it and process it here.
Unbelievable.
Which makes no sense, but a lot of that it lies within environmental regulations that were placed on these companies that aren't really fair. So,
David, appreciate the update. Thanks for coming in. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yep. David Livingston, Executive Director of Mississippi Loggers Association, has been our guest. We're coming right back, folks.
From the Seabrook.
Attention, adoring fans! It's time for
Middays with Gerard Gibert on SuperTalk, Mississippi.
This town ain't big, this town ain't small. It's a little of both, they say. Our ball club may be minor league, but at least it's Triple A. We sit below the Marlboro Man, above the right field wall. We do the wave all by ourselves. Hey, a blind man could have made that call. We like our beer flat as can be.
Welcome back, everyone. It is Middays. That would be Alabama with that tune there. It's baseball season. It's in full swing. And what about yesterday? So I was supposed to be on Newsmax yesterday at 3:15. You saw me. I was up here when you were finishing up with Good Things with Rebecca. And, the typical process is I come in here, I do it from the studio and set my laptop up, and they send me a Zoom link, and I access that and just wait, for the host to let you in the room, and somebody in the engineering group, of course, that handles all that stuff behind the scenes to produce the shows will usually contact me via Zoom, privately and say, hey, just checking you out. And they'll play some, like their theme music. Can you hear this? To check that out. And then they look at me and listen to me, testing. Okay, you look good, sound good, we're good to go. Just stand by. So, and of course, they're usually on the Zoom tool. They're sharing the live broadcast. So you can see what's going on. And they cut away to the White House because the president was with the world champion Philadelphia Eagles. And he was having fun with that. It's pretty neat. It's just fun to watch somebody at that level who can engage with these world-class athletes that play the game of professional football in this country. That was fun. And you could tell they were having fun with it, too. However, there was one absent individual.
I think there were a couple absent.
Well, I know.
Had scheduling conflicts.
So they say. I'm not sure I'm buying that. But they said, hey.
Well, what's more politically palatable, to say you have a scheduling conflict or to come out and say, I ain't going?
No,
I think we're past the point where you're going to see these millionaire athletes try to sway public opinion with their stances. They're just going to, if they don't want to go along with it, they're going to find an excuse.
I think you're right about that. And so, okay, we accept the excuse and move on. And so we're watching, and I'm laughing. I mean, some of it was kind of entertaining, as the president often is in those settings. And they came on and said, hey, look, just stand by. We're going to be coming to you. And I could tell, this doesn't look like it's going to happen. So after about 40 minutes, they came on and said, hey, look, the producers are going to drop. They can't make this work. But it happens. So I got preempted by the president there, right? Oh, man. It's supposed to be on Thursday, though. But that happens, I thought it was kind of neat, the Eagles being at the White House there. And him playing around with them. Brought a couple of them up to the mic, to the podium, to address the crowd. And that's pretty cool. So, something else we needed to talk about is former Governor Phil Bryant appointed to Donald Trump's FEMA review panel. Rhino, you think FEMA needs any review?
Just a bit.
This is a great appointment for Governor Phil Bryant. Lord knows the governors of Mississippi have had their fair share of FEMA ordeals, have they not? And, of course, Governor Bryant, no exception. He, of course, is highly regarded by President Trump. He, of course, is also a big Trump supporter. And he posted on his LinkedIn page yesterday, honored to receive this appointment by the president. Unfortunately, we've earned a lot of experience with natural disasters and recovery in Mississippi. Let's make America safe again. So this is really cool. And I think, again, the former governor would have excellent perspective and input to share. But we also got to acknowledge that this was a good move by the president. He recognized the flaws in FEMA, what appeared to be just sheer incompetence, and maybe kind of drifting away from their mission. That's the thing that makes me mad. And that's true of the whole dang bureaucratic mess in Washington, is it not? No, your job is this, not to be a political activist. And that's the problem. We got judges who are political activists. We got these faceless bureaucrats who are political activists. And that even extends to FEMA. No, just help people in emergencies. That's what you're supposed to do. We don't need your political crap.
The problem is, even if they weren't being political activists on the taxpayer dime, they were still being the stereotypical lazy government worker. Just look at Western North Carolina, where you had people literally sleeping in single-digit temperatures in tents because FEMA couldn't be bothered to work on weekends.
That's ridiculous. Like emergencies don't just come during the week, right?
Oh, I'm sorry. You couldn't get to this hotel room we've set a station in between the times of 9 and 4, but on Monday through Friday. You'll have to come back on Monday.
Unbelievable.
That kind of crap.
So looking at the list of those appointed, the former governor of Mississippi, certainly in good company, and I would guarantee you he has as much experience and knowledge of this issue as anybody in this group. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth, Florida Emergency Management Director Kevin Guthrie, the Miami Sheriff, the Tampa Mayor, Kristi Noem, Secretary of Homeland Security, the Governor of Texas Greg Abbott, the Governor of Virginia Glenn Youngkin. So all of these, I think, are excellent individuals to appoint to this group. So congratulations to former Governor Phil Bryant, and I look for them to produce some plans and a roadmap to really make FEMA great again, shall we dare to say it? That's kind of where we are, but that's pretty cool. So just continuing on with the first 100 days, we discussed that in the first segment. And, you know, we talked about the last thing I think we said was pulling out of the Paris Climate Accord again. But the firing of IRS agents, we got to put that on the list. Remember, the Inflation Reduction Act, the most inappropriately named bill in the history of the country.
Not so fast, my friend. The Affordable Care Act still exists.
That is true. That, too.
When your insurance goes up 400%, I'm pretty sure that is the opposite of affordable.
Yeah, the Unaffordable Care Act. So the former president, Joe Biden, wanted to add 87,000 new IRS agents. Now, I contended when that was announced, you remember, you can't find 87,000 people who remotely have the competence and the skills necessary to serve in that role. So remember, this president put in place an early retirement program, and he also fired many members of the IRS. They're like, what are you doing? And they really couldn't explain what they're doing. We know they were at home. So some 20,000 IRS sleuths and auditors are no longer employed by the organization. And then he's the school choice president. He's been promoting school choice. He's always been a fan of it. He appoints people to serve. Betsy DeVos in his prior administration as Department of Education Secretary, and now Linda McMahon, two ladies who are also staunch proponents of school choice. He's ordered a lot of the money that's honestly wasted in the Department of Education to go straight to the states, and he wants that to be used by parents to expand school choice for children. So it's not necessarily a direct kind of payment or voucher, if you will, to the parents, but it's money that's going from the Department of Ed to the states that he's directed to figure out a way to promote and support school choice. By the way, at 12:05 today, we've got Leah Ferretti, Director of Mississippi Ready, and we're going to be talking about the recent passing of universal school choice in the great state of Texas. Took a while to get there, but they finally got there. We'll dig into that with Leah at 12:05. But we're coming back with the final segment of Hour 1 on Middays. It's a Tuesday. We're coming right back in the Element Wealth Studio.
We've sent that.
Come on. Middays with Gerard Gibert.
All right, we are back
On SuperTalk, Mississippi.
throwing away a fortune in feelings, but someday you'll pay.
Welcome back, everyone. It is Middays. That's the thing that the tune that got it all started for the Foreigner Boys. That one right there. I remember, what was that, about 76, 7, something like that, when it was released? Seems like that.
Yeah, 77.
There you go. Well, the White House says they are pivoting a bit, taking steps to ease the pain on automobile tariffs. They plan to announce potentially today measures that would affect tariffs on imported cars and, more importantly, car parts. This is giving domestic automakers some time to react and adjust to the tariff strategy and relocate production to the United States. I'm not sure how long it takes to do that. I wouldn't think that's done with a snap of the fingers. So 25% on imported vehicles and on auto parts will remain in place, says the White House, but the tariffs will be modified so that they are not, quote, stacked with other tariffs, for example, on steel and aluminum. That, according to a White House spokesperson. So the whole tariff policy program is a bit Byzantine. It's kind of hard to keep up with, honestly. This morning, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent says they're getting really close to a deal with Japan. I hope that's the case. I do think that would be a boost for the markets and maybe quell some of the uncertainty even within the business community.
But we were talking about that off the air, and that it comes back to Trump's showmanship, as to who will be signing that first trade deal out of the blocks.
Yeah.
Because if you pick some random tiny micronation that was willing to give you a really good deal, but nobody's heard of it, does it make as big a splash as if you come out and say, the first deal on the table agreed to is Japan?
And I think you're right. I think that's important. You need to have something of significance to make that really something that would adjust, influence the business community, the economy, the markets in general, just some degree of confidence that, yeah, we're headed down the right path. Something else I did not include in my list of the accomplishments is just this feels like a return to a society, certainly within the federal government, that prioritizes merit over one's physical attributes or sexual orientation. That, of course, was prioritized. The latter was by the Biden administration. Way more important, what's your gender, your gender identity, your race, your ethnicity, your nationality, and a host of other attributes. Oh, yeah, that's more important than, I don't know, your ability to actually do something and be qualified. And that not only was embedded in the hiring and compensation and promotion and assignment process, but the policies that were issued by the various agencies also prioritized that. I mean, who could forget Secretary of Transportation Pete Buttigieg talking about roads being racist and nonsense like that?
It was bridges were racist.
Oh, bridges. Okay, pardon me.
Because they wouldn't accommodate buses.
The other I remember was trees, right? They didn't plant trees.
Even though the bridge was on a parkway where it's designed to be scenic.
Oh, gosh. But that, of course, and then you had, the privilege walks in the Air Force. I remember us sharing that on the show one time. And, heck, the our museums, the Smithsonian Institute had these huge displays of all this racial propaganda nonsense. All that sort of stuff just took over in the Biden administration. Title IX, and they're just upending that. So this president addressed that early on, and it aggravated a lot of people because, wait, you mean just the fact that the color of my skin is different, or considered a minority, I should say, or my nationality, my ethnicity, my sexual orientation, that doesn't get me special preferential treatment? I mean, that's what the Biden administration was doing, honestly. So no more. We're stepping aside for Fox News and SuperTalk News, and then coming right back.
Of Middays with Gerard Gibert is brought to you by the Mississippi Business Journal. Visit msbusinessjournal.com. Scott Coopwood, publisher and president.
And now, another hour of the talk that keeps Mississippi talking. Middays with Gerard Gibert.
Begin your transition now.
Now on Super Talk Mississippi.
Welcome back, everyone. It is Middays. Coming at you from the Element Wealth Studio. So I'm looking at this video that Rhino just sent me. What the heck is the deal with old Liz Warren there? Oh, my gosh. This was posted by Jerry Dunleavy IV.
Yeah, that's the Twitter account that I found it on, but it's Sam Fragoso from the Talk Easy pod. He was interviewing Senator Elizabeth Warren, and he kind of got her squirming. Let's listen in on the line of questioning that really kind of put her off her guard.
Do you regret saying that President Biden had a mental acuity? He had a sharpness to him. You said that up until July of last year.
I said what I believe to be true.
And you think he was as sharp as you?
I have to pause right there because you can't hear it, but if you're watching, you can see her. She starts to chuckle and then catches herself.
Yeah.
I said I had not seen decline. And I hadn't at that point.
You did not see any decline from 2024 Joe Biden to 2021 Joe Biden?
Not when I said that. You know, the thing is, he was sharp. He was on his feet. I saw him. Live event. I had meetings with him a couple of times.
Senator, on his feet is not praise. He can speak in sentences, is not praise.
All right. Fair enough. Fair enough.
Oh, gosh. Liz, what in the wide world of sports is up with that? She was covering. She knew it, and she knows she's been caught.
They all do.
Yeah, they do.
Them and the mainstream media.
No doubt about it.
And they're trying to do these weird dances around admitting that they've just lied to your face and expected you to buy it hook, line, and sinker.
There's no doubt. And now they look kind of silly, honestly. Because,
well, in fairness, they've always looked silly.
Well, they have, but they look sillier. As a result, I mean, now we know that they knew it. They covered up. Look, it cost them the election. They possibly had a chance if they'd have selected a different candidate, not stuck with that guy so long, and then, wow, they had to sweep in Kamala Harris, who it's a tie between her and Hillary Clinton as the worst candidates for president in our history.
Yeah, believe it or not, I do have liberal friends, and I had a liberal friend talking to me over the weekend about how disenchanted he is with the Democrat Party because he doesn't feel like any of the party members' cares, desires, needs, wants, anything are really carried out at the upper level of the party. And the point he made was just look at the last 3 elections.
Yeah.
Nobody from the population really chose who was going to run for president.
That's
It was
absolutely
just the
true.
big wigs, the big donors, and the elites.
Totally true. So they look silly now because they stayed with this guy, and it ultimately hurt them. I don't think there's any question about that because they lost. They lost bigly. So, I don't know what their plan is. Really, they seem to be kind of.
They're doubling down.
I know, and that doesn't make any sense to me. Don't they get that this really isn't working? But
when you've painted yourself into a corner, you either mess up your paint job or you paint over your feet. They're at the painting over their feet part right now.
That's exactly what's happening. They just don't seem to have any default leader. They're just kind of rudderless on the ocean.
Just adding layers to their shoes.
Man, doubling down on this El Salvador criminal terrorist.
Quote-unquote Maryland man.
Yeah, Maryland man, my butt. So they're doubling down on that. They're still doubling down on all that DEI crap and nonsense. Going crazy on that. And then you got Governor Pritzker of Illinois. Is this a prelude, Rhino, to his announcement as a candidate for a president of these United States? If you haven't seen, folks, he's actually calling for mass protest.
As a fellow fat fella, I'm going to tell him like it is. Unless he sheds a few pounds, he ain't got a snowball's chance in Hades.
It's definitely an issue. I mean, and it will be for him too. But it's besides the fact that he's just insufferable. On top of that,
well, it's not even that. It's like when you go to a restaurant. If somebody brings you a plate of food and it's a big jumble, you're not going to look at it as being as appetizing if they brought it out to you looking pretty.
It's true.
Same thing goes with politics. There's a certain level of attractiveness or just conventional attraction that has to take place. And frankly, it's what put a ceiling on Chris Christie's career.
No doubt about it. Yeah, I mean, it's a little surprising that they could ascend to the level of governor in their respective states on that basis. But you don't know what the rest of the field looked like was an issue. But he's literally...
It comes back down to the people vote for president based on who they'd have a beer with.
No doubt.
Who you want to hang out with. Who would you consider a friend? And like it or not, there is a stigma associated with being above average in your weight. There is a notion that you don't have control of yourself, you're lazy. Like, there's all these different negative aspects that are associated with it that will definitely bring him down in the eyes of people that don't give a rat's rear end about what his politics say.
No doubt about it. Well, I've thought, and I don't think I'm alone in this opinion, that people vote largely on emotion, more so than anything else. And it's whatever kind of triggers the positive feelings and sentiments from an emotional standpoint, that's usually who comes out on top. And so there is something to be said by one's physical appearance. It just matters. But Pritzker said in his keynote address at the New Hampshire Democrat Party's 100 Club dinner, I think this was last week, he said, quote, "They have to understand that we will fight their cruelty with every megaphone and microphone that we have. We must castigate them on the soapbox and then punish them at the ballot box." He's so clever, isn't he?
Not really.
Not
in the days of AI.
That's true. Because do you find yourself, and I have to admit this, I see something that's published out on the internet, typically social media, and by an individual, and I'll look at it and say, there's no way they wrote that. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah.
And then I'll go out and search for that. Oh, yeah, comes right up verbatim. And that's fine. That's what the value of the tool is. But just know that if it doesn't sort of match you and kind of your reputation for your written and spoken and word and communication skills, it's probably going to be easy to determine you did that with the aid of technology. It's not just sort of cleaning it up a little bit, and maybe improving word use, sentence structure, grammar, punctuation. No, this is like, you really don't have the ability, based on my communications with you, to produce something like that. Pritzker went on to say, we will never join so many Republicans in the special place in hell reserved for quislings and cowards. We will relegate their portraits to the museum halls reserved for tyrants and traitors. That definitely sounds like it was a little GPT there, doesn't it?
Oh, the tyrants and traitors, that's kind of their go-to at this point. The quisling term, which is basically just an old archaic term for traitor or collaborator with your enemy. Then, yeah.
So
I would point at that one and go, either that's a pet word of his or that one came from the speechwriter, a.k.a. the AI.
It reminded me a bit, remember Maxine Waters? When she was suggesting in a speech, it was like on the streets in her district or something, as I recall. This was in 2018. You got to go harass them. Get in their faces. Remember that? Yeah, here we go. Let's make sure we show up wherever we have to show up. And if you see anybody from that cabinet in a restaurant, in a department store, at a gas station, you get out and you create a crowd and you push back on them, and you tell them they're not welcome anymore anywhere. So Pritzker's kind of following the old Maxine Waters playbook.
It's not exactly the example you want to follow there, Pritzker.
Exactly.
She's dumber than a bag of hammers.
We're coming right back in the Element Well studio.
Hey, this is...
And now, the talk that keeps Mississippi talking.
Now, on to the real part.
Dynamite! On SuperTalk, Mississippi.
And during the few moments that we have left, we want to talk right down to earth in a language that everybody here can easily understand.
Okay, so this just breaking. A senior commerce official says finished goods cars fully assembled that have 85% domestic content will have no tariffs. So this is what I'm saying. That's being perceived of as positive, by the way, for the markets. But this is what I mean by it's a little hard to keep up with, Rhino, if you think about it, because it's not like across the board on everything from an individual country or something to that effect, which would be fairly straightforward and simple. It's quite nuanced. And there are lots of exceptions and details and multiple layers and time frames and the like. And that's what kind of makes it difficult. So they also announced this morning a reimbursement on auto parts tariffs up to 3.75% of the value of a U.S.-made car for 1 year, followed by 2.5% of the car's value in the second year, and then it would be phased out altogether. Now, this, of course, you got to recall that tariffs are paid by the American company which imports. So these would be the companies that are purchasing these parts from foreign makers of the parts, bring them into this country, and then include them in the assembly, which often can be completed within the country, but still includes lots of components that are sourced from other countries that are subject to the tariffs. So that's where it gets a bit convoluted. You got to sort of keep up with it. Let's see. They're now saying manufacturers of U.S.-built autos will get 15% offset for the value of those vehicles. Wow. Speaking of 15, just as a number that came to mind, I wonder if a 15, I hadn't done the math on this, but just simplify things. 15% tariff, 15% individual income tax rate, 15% corporate income tax rate, 15% capital gains rate, and 15% rate on estates over a certain amount. How about that? Just make it simple. Meanwhile, of course, the Congress back in session. They're all up there under the dome, and they're trying to put together the final one big beautiful bill. At this point, not clear what that final measure will look like. They're trying. I heard Leader Thune on the floor yesterday said, yep, we want to make the Trump tax cuts, the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act passed in 2017, scheduled to expire at the end of this year. Want to make that permanent, not just extend it a few years, in which case you'll have to face this dilemma again. And you don't know who could be in charge then of the Congress and the White House that could make extending the measure, those provisions, again, difficult. Right now, they're in pretty good shape with control of the House, the Senate, and the White House. And I've heard rumblings that we're looking at July 4th. I certainly hope it doesn't take till July 4th to get this measure, the one big beautiful bill, to the president's desk for signature and enactment. Let's hope it comes about sooner than that. Closer to home, the governor put the old veto pen to work. You saw that, Rhino. He vetoed a measure that would rescind some of the certificate of need laws in the state of Mississippi. I mean, I would call it certificate of need repeal light. But there was kind of a carve-out in it for one provider that the governor did not care for. And so he got the old veto pen out. In the meantime, we've not heard anything with respect to calling of a special session. Zero has come out of the governor's mansion, and that's where it would have to come from because he's the only one that has the authority to call a special session. So we don't know much about it. We did get, something we talked about on the program many times, Rhino. We did get a kratom bill, which I think most importantly restricts the sale, can't be sold. Has to be sold over the counter, I believe, and requires a proof of age. Can't buy it as a minor. That was the main thing. And then there's some forms of the product, as I understand it, that are not available for sale, that are banned in the state of Mississippi. I think that's pretty much what happened. But that's about it that I can think of. What else we got in terms of state government we should cover? Rhino, besides that, just kind of waiting on the special session. I don't know that we got a whole lot other than that.
Just a whole lot of hurry up and wait at this point.
Yeah. Like I said, the kratom bill. So we got kratom and wine. Those were two big accomplishments. We got nothing across the finish line with respect to school choice. Meanwhile, a couple of states over in Texas, the latest state to fall in line by enacting significant universal school choice. They've allocated $1 billion a year to it. That would be for the education savings accounts, because even those families with their children in private schools would be eligible for a voucher. The state of Texas spends $10,000 per student at the state level compared to Mississippi's $7,000 per student. Significantly more per student in the state of Texas than Mississippi. I found that kind of interesting. And then we're concerned somewhat about shortages. The president did meet with major retail CEOs last week who have warned that if something doesn't break, we could be facing a shortage of products that we're accustomed to having on the shelves. So we shall see. What about this Palace of Versailles, as it is being referred to? The Federal Reserve $2.5 billion on a headquarters building, despite the fact that the Federal Reserve loses money. It's actually supposed to be self-sufficient from fees, and that's not working out too well. So it's upside down financially, but yet they still had the gall to erect. You've seen this building? Oh, my gosh, and that's why it is being, shall we say, affectionately referred to as the Palace of Versailles. I mean, that's how ornate this thing is. This is insane. $2.5 billion. This was rubber stamped in 2021 because the Fed is not self-sufficient, is not generating enough revenue to cover its expenses. The taxpayers are subsidizing it, just like we do everything else. But they're calling it, they've deemed it the Palace of Versailles. Incredible. But it is amazing, the facility itself. Of course, costs have ballooned to complete the project. It was estimated at $1.9 billion. Supposed to be finished in 2027, but there have been significant increases in building materials that far exceed just your basic kind of expected escalations during the course of a project. Man, oh man, what an extravagant facility. Just looking at some photos inside and outside of this building that will house the Federal Reserve. Gee whiz. I don't know, should they be treated like royalty? Because that's what it looks like. I'd say no. It's my vote. But, man, it's insane what that building
There's
looks
something
like.
to be said for spending the money to have a nice-looking, public-facing portion of the nation's capital. So if you have monuments or buildings where the public are supposed to go, then it would behoove America to make it look good. It's a giant waste of time, energy, and tax dollars to give a bunch of overblown bureaucrats and bean counters a swanky new office when they've frankly screwed the pooch the last decade and a half.
That I would agree. It just seems like that you'd make sure your, as my dad used to say, your nose is clean before you kind of upgrade like this, but they don't seem to be that concerned about that. Really is incredible. We are in the Element Wealth studio. We're coming right back on Middays. Stay with us.
You know you shook me, baby. You shook me all night long. I know you really, really did, babe. I said you shook me, baby. You shook me all night long.
From the Get on. Middays with Gerard Gibert.
It is
on SuperTalk, Mississippi.
Well, it's 8 o'clock in Boise, Idaho. I found my limo driver, Mr. Take us to the show.
Yeah, old Pritzker says, the governor of Illinois, the GOP can't have a moment of peace. Ah, yes. It's you can't help but think, right, of the video that I referred to many times after you showed it to me on the college campus, a pro-life exhibition there, tents set up, just peaceful presentation of a pro-life position in the heart of a college campus, tents, reading materials, posters, and so forth. But yet, inevitably, the left-wing loons on campus have to come by, get in the young folks' faces, and just be indignant to them and hostile. And, of course, somebody's videoing it. That's how we got it. And then right after that, this guy who, again, I blew it on this when you would stereotype this person. And I try not to do that. And I know people may be critical of that. Let's be honest. We all do it. You know you do. You see somebody and you immediately think probably kind of what that person's all about. You just can't help it. It's just human nature.
You can look somebody in the face and know immediately they've microwaved a spoon.
Well, this person comes by. It's just so great because he inserts himself in the camera and says, what does he say? Behold, the tolerant left. That's exactly what this feels like with Pritzker calling for, you got to get in their faces. No rest. Unbelievable. And then, the other...
Sounds a lot like the rhetoric that they were using right before somebody took a pot shot at President Trump.
Well, I was just going to say that there's nutcases out there that hear this crap.
And we still don't know anything about that guy.
I know. And they'll take it to the nth degree, and next thing you know, they're out there shooting somebody. That's the risk of this. That has no place, not only in our politics, in our society. I mean, if you want to talk about how you're going to outwork your opponent, more importantly, when's the last time you heard the Democrats even talk about policies? They don't.
Unless it represents a tiny, infinitesimally small percentage of the population.
Well, they're good at that. There's no doubt. But in terms of, think about just countering the Trump agenda, what have they said? All they've said is the Trump agenda is bad. They haven't said anything with respect to here's our alternative or our option or the direction in which we would like to go to address and solve the nation's problems. They haven't said squat. In fact, most of the time during the Biden administration, when folks were unhappy about inflation, cost of living, open borders, decriminalization of crime, etc. Oh, no, there's no problem. That's what you usually got. They would just gaslight you. Oh, you're just dreaming when you think that those are problems. I mean, just do it with a straight face. And in fact, to that effect, California, if I can find that, they're talking about out there in the California Assembly, there's a lawmaker who has proposed a bill to decriminalize welfare fraud below $25,000 over administrative errors. The bill would require officials to determine whether benefits were authorized as a result of an error. Oh, you could make that claim to any of this garbage. Oh, it's just an error, right? State Senator Lola Smallwood Cuevas introduced Senate Bill 560, would delete criminal penalties for welfare fraud below $25,000. Did they not learn anything from the $900 threshold for arrest and prosecution of theft, of robbery, burglary? Guess not. Unbelievable.
There's not a single ounce of logic in the brains of West Coast liberals.
This is just crazy.
I mean, just look at the arguments they're having over a proposed bill that would outlaw the purchase of children for sex. They're debating whether or not to include 16 and 17-year-olds in that bill.
Unbelievable. Behold the tolerant left again, right? Good grief. Of course, you've got to have what I think will be customary in every dang administration. An impeachment. Articles of impeachment.
Is that the fourth or fifth one this term so far?
Sri Thanadar introduced, I think that's right, Monday. He had filed articles of impeachment. I'm not even familiar with this guy. And believe it or not, that was one of the topics I was scheduled to discuss on Newsmax yesterday. I had to go look up. I've never seen this guy before. I mean, he's not been one who has served as a subject for any sort of national media interviews. From the state of Michigan, business person.
So how do you get your face in front of the cameras?
File articles of impeachment, of
ding,
course.
Ding, 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 ding.
Just attention-seeking politician. He said, I have introduced articles of impeachment against President Trump. This was in an announcement he made online. When Trump ignores the Constitution, Congress, and the courts, he is not fighting for America. He is tearing it down and endangering our democracy. Sounded like what you were describing earlier. Oh, never mind. That's not it, right? So 7 articles of impeachment.
Yeah, it's no longer Maryland, man. That's no longer the constitutional crisis. That's so passé. That's so last week. Now we're on to arresting judges. That's where we got to draw the line. That's the constitutional crisis. Maryland, man, he can stay down there. We don't care about it anymore. We got to worry about these judges getting arrested.
So true. So I shared with you my thoughts on what I felt like were the accomplishments in the first 100 days, if you didn't catch that in the first hour of the program. But, of course, the left-wing media, I'm looking at the Boston Globe. I've shared with you before that I consider that, having consumed it for a few years, and other, certainly newspapers, which are generally controlled by the leftist ilk in this country, they had a different take on the first 100 days. I know you're shocked at that. And they just talk about the chaos and the disruption, a campaign of disruption that doesn't resemble traditional governance. There's no 10-point plan or legislative coalition. Instead, Trump is attempting to transform America through confrontation, purging the bureaucracy, unsettling global alliances, and weaponizing executive power.
Wait, did they really say purging the bureaucracy?
They did.
Did they give him credit for that? Or are they trying to say that's a bad thing?
They're saying that's a bad thing.
I would take credit for it.
I agree.
Sounds like a compliment to me.
I totally agree.
But then again, that's how twisted and backwards the liberal logic is.
I agree. And they do, I guess, acknowledge that he's not traditional, but that's what people want. They're tired of the wake up there, Boston Globe. That's exactly why people elected this guy. They're tired of the tradition. The tradition is tradition for the sake of tradition. He broke the mold because the mold was sick. It was broke. That's the problem. And they don't seem to acknowledge that, yeah, Americans saw that. Wasn't in their best interest. They're tired of just this political elite ilk, demographic, if you will. I could call it that, I think. That's just... So people like the president, as is the case, I think, with almost all successful business people, especially innovators, they don't think about all the stuff in the way of accomplishing goals and objectives. They just attack those head on, and they don't let them impede their production and their ability to just achieve and attain the end result. It's career politicians and bureaucrats. Oh, you can't do that, right? I mean, they're so just, I guess, indoctrinated with that idea. You can't do that because we got a this and a this and a that and a that. And they just don't even try. They give up. And it's just status quo. And it just keeps on rolling. Keeps on rolling down the track. Same old deal.
It's what I call the not my problem.
That's true. That's pervasive in government. Yeah, I agree. So, but this person, this president, he looks at stuff, well, why can't we do that? That's what you want. That's exactly what you want in political offices. People who think like disruptors, that don't accept the status quo, that don't just conclude. You know, I used to run into this in business a lot. Just in a respectful, nice way, trying to understand why certain processes and policies and systems worked a certain way. Oh, it's just always been like that. Yeah, but that's not really the best way. Has anybody ever stood back and stepped back and said, we can actually make this better? Normally, no. Because like you say, it's not my problem. That creates work for me, right? Yeah, that's not how innovators think. We're coming right back in the Element Wealth studio.
that means.
Middays with Gerard Gibert.
We'll do it live.
On SuperTalk, Mississippi.
Late last night, Senator Josh Hawley, the Republican from Missouri, reintroduced the Pelosi Act. That was first introduced in 2023, and this would ban members of Congress from direct trading of stocks.
Preventing elected leaders from owning securities and investments Act, a.k.a. Pelosi.
So they would have to place them in a blind trust, if you will. I think it's kind of funny that he styled it as the Pelosi Act. I kind of have mixed feelings about this. I think from just a pure optics perspective, probably makes sense to implement, but it would dramatically limit the field of those who would be interested in serving in the U.S. Congress. I believe that. The other thing is they are required to report their trades, and they do, and you can look that information up. There's actually
their trades.
Their trades, right.
Not their cousins.
That's
not their
right.
sister-in-laws.
That's right.
Not their dog walkers.
And the reason that I don't find this is, again, it's an optics thing, and I get that, and as long as there's this doubt and this supposition, it's a problem. You don't want the American people just thinking about it, worried about it, and concerned that, their votes are being influenced by their personal equity holdings. I get it, and that's a problem. But if you look at what they trade, because all that's widely available, talking about the information about what they trade, it's not a surprise that it's primarily all the big names that everybody else owns. I mean, it's not like, that was a nugget that only people in Congress knew. Who would have thought Apple would actually be a good company? That's number one, by the way. It's Apple. It's like the rest of the world. It's Apple, Microsoft, NVIDIA, Palo Alto. And by the way, there's an app. I can't remember the name of it. You may have seen it. You can download where you can track the trades of members of Congress and other notable figures as well.
Oh, yeah, you can even invest just like them.
Yeah.
Where if they make a purchase, you can buy in and make a purchase from that same stock portfolio. And not from the portfolio. But.
That's right. And it's, generally speaking, it's the wealthiest members of Congress that have the most trades because they got the most ability to do so. Top of the list in terms of trades, Representative Ro Khanna from the Silicon Valley area of New York. He's the guy that I think I told you I ran into when I went to the inauguration. Ran into him in a cafe, took my photo with him, and still have him on the list. He said he'd come on the show. Well, he traded, I was a little shocked at this, 4,000 times. 4,000 times in 2024. Wow, that's incredible. 66 million shares. Number two, this is a guy you don't hear much about, and I came across his wealth a few years ago. It's Representative Mike McCall from Texas. I think he's like number 2 or 3 in Congress in terms of wealth. He traded 1,925 times, 167 million shares. That's got a lot of money. Tommy Tuberville, who'd have thunk? 270 trades. Representative Kathy Manning, a Democrat in North Carolina. John James, I think, first-term congressman from the great state of Michigan. I want to say he's running for governor now in Michigan. Marjorie Taylor Greene, she's right up there as well. Tom Carper, Democrat from Delaware. Markwayne Mullen, Republican senator from Oklahoma, 97 trades. And you can even find out what their estimated return on investment was from those trades. So, but Hawley's got it up, and the president, I think last week, says, if that bill makes it through Congress, I will sign it. He said that, banning trades. On the C Spire text line, Gary in the Berg, who had a request. I don't know if we handled that for Gary or not. He also sent me a photo of Susanna Hoffs from 88, when she was the lead singer of the Bangles. Said she could be the next beverage cart girl at Annandale. That's pretty cool. He says, the cost of tariffs, what's the cost of no tariffs? Stupid trade deals and massive dependence on countries like China for critical components. NAFTA was a disaster. Fair trade and use selective tariffs where needed for leverage. Our country's long-term futures at stake and no time to be weak. But was NAFTA a disaster? And I'm just being devil's advocate here. What we got is Canada and Mexico who are willing to produce stuff at a whole lot lower price point than we are. I would say that it wasn't that as much as it was egregious unions that drove much of the manufacturing out of the country.
China being welcomed to the World Trade Organization.
I would agree. That was a problem, but
because that came after NAFTA. And when you look at the graph, it does go down after NAFTA, but then when China joins, it just falls off a cliff.
Absolutely right. It's amazing, though, to me that our total imports from China are about $450 billion. I'm trying to figure out how that's such a big impact, and that's because our economy is $30 trillion. We're coming right back with Leah Ferretti. Stay with us.
And now, the talk that keeps Mississippi talking.
That's what I like to listen to.
You're listening to Middays with Gerard Gibert here on SuperTalk Mississippi.
Welcome back, everyone. It is Middays, and we are live in the Element Wealth studio. So I just want to pass this on real quick. The Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent says they've been hammering out, he's referring to right now 6 trade deals. You seeing that at this point? So hopefully we'll see an announcement of where pen has been put to paper, as the saying goes. Right now, though, it's Leah Ferretti, Director of Mississippi Ready. Leah, always good to see you. Thanks for coming in.
Thanks for having me, Gerard. I am so excited to be here today and to talk about the movement that's moving across our nation.
It is. And so first, to tell the folks, you've been on before discussing this, but a reminder exactly what is Mississippi Ready, what's your mission, and how you personally got involved in that.
Okay, so Mississippi Ready is a movement. It's an initiative for school choice here in our great state. We believe that every child is unique, and every child deserves a quality K-12 education that fits their unique needs. And my journey began over a decade ago on this parent choice journey when I didn't have a choice for my own children. And fast forward to today, here we are. As a parent, I saw quickly that there wasn't a road paved for us. There wasn't a road paved for what options are out there, how to navigate those options, because, certain entities aren't going to tell you what your options are, because they may want you to be locked cold into where you are. So just doing research and being a mama who wasn't willing to take no for an answer, Mississippi Ready was born, and we are ready to move forward with more quality K-12 education options here in our state.
So, as you have noted, I followed you, of course. I've known you for a long time, and you and I have been kind of joined hands working on this issue together. For quite some time, we've made little progress, honestly, in the state of Mississippi. But during the interim, all of our surrounding states, they've been full speed ahead with this.
Zoom, right? Yeah, everyone has passed us. Right now, I'm sure you have heard and the listeners have learned, Texas has passed universal school choice. So now they are the largest state in our nation, in our union, that has universal school choice. And Mississippi is the only state surrounded by other blue states, maybe, that doesn't have that freedom and doesn't have that option. And we do have some choices here in Mississippi, very limited options. Those options, my family was able to utilize that to further my children's education. There was a season in life where traditional public school just didn't work for my family. It wasn't what they needed. And I was able to use an ESA for my children because they qualified and customize their education early on to what they needed. Now, fast forward to today, we live in a different area, and they are able to assimilate into a traditional public school now. And that is the best fit in this season of life for my children.
Yeah, you make a great point there that I think needs to be completely and continuously, I should say, reiterated, which is that the school choice does not mean some sort of intentional harm to public schools. In fact, it's quite the opposite. We want to see the public schools thrive and improve. And in your particular case, because you moved to an area where it turned out the public school was the best choice, you exercise that choice.
Yes, absolutely. And, if you live in an area that has a great public school system or the school is working for your family, that is fantastic. You should absolutely count your blessings and say your prayers every night, because not every Mississippi family is that lucky.
Right. And people aren't as mobile as often as thought. You'll hear people say, well, gee, if they just want to attend a better school, they just need to pick up and move.
Yeah.
Everybody doesn't have that option.
No. Do you know that years ago, and I shall not name any names, a legislator told me and my family told me and my husband, well, if you don't like your school, you should just up and move. Okay, buddy, because it's that easy. It's that easy to uproot our family, sell our home, shut the doors to our businesses, find another job, because it's that simple.
Yeah, it's not really a viable option, honestly. So, as you well know, we struggle here in Mississippi to get legislation across the finish line. We've had everything from just really simple, almost watered down public-to-public transfer, we call it open enrollment, all the way up to a phasing in of universal school choice, which is what Texas is doing, Arkansas, Louisiana, Alabama, Tennessee. They've all done that. Florida's had it for a long time, Arizona, Iowa. We could go down the list. Mm-hmm. I think there's some 16 now states total. But in Mississippi, we had just a real simple bill Representative Jansen Owen introduced, as you know, passed the House, which would have permitted total portability within the public schools. You live in a district, you're assigned to a school, but you want to attend a different one. Neither school could stand in the way of that unless there was a capacity issue on the part of the transferee school. But that went down to the Senate, and it didn't even get brought up in Senator Dennis DeBar's committee.
Which is mind-blowing, and it's so unfortunate because parents are speaking up. We are at a moment in our time, in our state, that parents, they know they have a voice. They're tired of seeing our neighboring states surpass us with more freedom and more education options, and parents are speaking up. And it's time that our lawmakers, whether it's one side or not, you need to start listening up. Look at Texas. Look what they did in the 2024 elections. They positioned themselves specifically to get school choice, to get parent choice, to get those freedoms pushed across the line. And here we are in Mississippi, surrounded. And it's vital. It's important that if we want to remain competitive, look at all the industry that's coming into our state and all these jobs. And if we want to remain competitive, if we want to keep growing, we've got to do this. We've got to do this, or our families are going to start leaving more than they already are.
Yeah, it's unfortunate that we just can't seem to make any progress. So do you hear anything specifically, Leah, with respect to those in the legislature, in particular in the Senate, the Lieutenant Governor, Senator DeBar, who are no fans of almost any form of school choice? What do they tell you? What's the objection that you hear?
Well, I feel like a lot of times people speak out of both sides of their mouth, and they're not listening to their constituents, or not listening to their families. Just as we hear, there are certain opponents that we're tired of being lied to as parents. We are tired of being lied to, and we are tired of being bullied. So I feel like it's time for the Senate to step up, and, you don't have to be bullied. You can listen to families and stand up for children and what's right.
The Speaker of the House, Jason White, is a strong proponent of education choice, and many in the House are as well. It's kind of striking, isn't it, that we have this just contrast between both of the chambers.
It is, and a lot of people from out of state will ask me, they're like, Leah, what's going on? You know, I mean, you're a super majority there in Mississippi. What is going on? That's a great question. That's a great question, and I think you would have to ask those individuals themselves on why they won't move forward.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard from the lieutenant governor. I mean, he's made it very clear he's just not a fan of what he calls public money being used for, say, private school vouchers. But even with respect to just open enrollment public to public, we couldn't get that through either.
Well, I think thinking of that as a narrative as public dollars, well, those aren't public dollars. Those are my children's education dollars.
Right.
And if you don't look at it like that, then it makes sense, right? I mean, the dollar should absolutely follow the child. And you remember when we changed the funding formula, there was a lot of pushback on that. And it kind of makes you wonder, well, why?
Yeah.
Why do we not want to know how much we are spending per student? Unfortunately, the business of education has become so inflated with administrative cost. As a classroom teacher, I have witnessed it firsthand. That money is not getting to the classroom where it belongs. It's not getting to those teachers' salaries where it belongs. When my husband moved me out of my last classroom, I cannot tell you how many boxes I had loaded up and packed with stuff. And he said, Leah, do we own all of this stuff? And I just kind of looked at him like, well, yeah, it just kind of happened. I don't know, just accumulated. If I needed it, I just would go buy it for my students.
There's what you're saying is true, but you weren't unique in that respect, right?
Absolutely.
Lots of these teachers.
All teachers.
Yeah. Spend money out of their pocket to make sure their classroom has the stuff they need.
Every day, because they love their children, they love those students, and they want them to have the best learning environment possible. So teachers, they already have meager salaries here in Mississippi, and they will spend any penny they have to help their own children.
Yeah. I think that's absolutely right. My daughter, of course, was a teacher for 8 years, and I witnessed the same thing. What you're saying is exactly right. Seems like we got a little bit too much money going to where it shouldn't, as you say, not going into the classroom. Teachers shouldn't be bearing the burden of that expense whatsoever.
Absolutely not.
Stick around. We keep talking about this.
Yeah,
we got Leah Ferretti, Director of Mississippi Ready, in the Element Wealth studio. We're coming right back.
We've done all we...
It's so awesome!
Middays with Gerard Gibert.
Come on, let's get on with the show!
On SuperTalk, Mississippi.
On the C Spire text line, we're talking to Leah Ferretti, the director of Mississippi Ready, talking about school choice. My daughter is 25 now, very successful. No thanks to government schools. She is mildly dyslexic. We got no empathy or help from an A school. We homeschooled from third grade on. And that's the point of choice, is it not, Leah? You can't just assume it's an A school, therefore they have all the resources necessary to handle these special cases. Yes. Now, we do have a dyslexia scholarship, thankfully, in the state of Mississippi, but it's hard to take advantage of that when you have to travel a long distance often.
Yes, well, with the dyslexia scholarship, there's only a handful of schools that are approved to do it. And I promise you, there are licensed dyslexia therapists at more schools than those handful of schools. Right now in the state of Mississippi, I think there's over 300 licensed dyslexia therapists, or we call them CALT, Certified Academic Language Therapist. Now, dyslexia is that's my love, because God has blessed me not to win the lottery, but to have 3 children with dyslexia, and they are on different ends of the spectrum. I've got one that's severe, one that's moderate, one that I was able to start therapy with her very early, which was a game changer. And to that parent saying, they were in an A school, that's what parent choice is about. Like you said, it doesn't matter if it's a school that it may be an A school, it could be fabulous, but it may not work for this individual student. All right, so you're not looking at this is something that droves and droves of kids might leave a public school system if they have universal school choice. Absolutely not. That is asinine. When people say, "Oh, public education is gonna fail if we have universal school choice or have any type of parent choice," that is insane. Look at all of our surrounding states. Look at all the other states that have parent choice. The sky has not fallen. In fact, it has improved outcomes for all schools across the board.
Yeah, and so the whole point of school choice is that proponents believe that families, parents, caretakers of children, are better equipped to decide on the appropriate and the optimum education setting. It's not about being in an A school or this school or that school. It's just there are multiple approaches to educating a child, as we well know now.
Yes.
We've innovated many different approaches. Let the parents choose the best for their child.
Yes, I know what works for my children. I know my children better than anyone in this world, and it's kind of insulting to insinuate that an institution should know my children better than I do and what works for them.
Yeah, and that's what this is really all about. So on the C Spire text line, let's see. Let me see. This person keeps sending lots of stuff here. Obviously, an opponent of school choice, and we respect
that's okay.
Your opinion. Says that school choice is proven to have detrimental effect by a majority of good research. By all means, keep pushing this garbage. Well, I guess I would say to that is, well, that's the choice of whoever made it. So if it's not working out for them, so we need the government to tell them the way you need to do it is the best. I mean, they might as well be in the grocery store shopping with us for food. You can't buy that, buy that. It's
right.
the same sort of deal.
And to that listener, I will tell you, if this is garbage, let me tell you about the 16-year-old that I live with, my oldest son, that is finally successful in the classroom because I was able to customize his education according to his needs when there was a time that we didn't have an option, we didn't have a choice, and now he is an A-B, couple of C's, because C's get degrees in our house, C student, and he is happy to go to school. He loves his school. Actually, the other day, I was like, hey, you want to take a personal day and maybe go play Top Golf? He's like, no, Mom, I'm trying to get exempt. What 16-year-old tells you, hey, no, I've got to go to school because I want to get exempt? My 16-year-old is not the same child he was 10 years ago because of parent choice. So when you want to call it garbage, why don't you go look at that blue-eyed boy in his face and tell him, oh, that's garbage. No, ma'am, no, sir. It works.
Right. So also this person says, and that's a great story, by the way, admin costs are comprised of costs other than salaries. We acknowledge that. Mm-hmm. By the way, what do you think is a fair admin salary since you believe they are overpaid? Well, there are a whole bunch of people that work in administration. That's the first thing I'd say. So you can't just come up with like sort of a benchmark salary that would apply to all those jobs. And the second thing is I believe it's whatever the market will bear. The question is, do we have lots of jobs and are we spending lots of money on things we just don't need that aren't really enhancing the quality of education?
Let me give you an example, Gerard. I've worked in a school district where they hired an individual administratively, it worked at the central office, to make copies for the entire district. So that is an entire salary and benefits package to pay someone to make copies. I promise you, I am very capable adult that can make copies for my classroom on my own. So those are just examples.
That's crazy. And they're look, I've seen situations where the schools would purchase technology but not spend money to teach the teachers how to use the technology or the administrators, and it would just sit there.
All day, every day, and twice on Sundays. And it's the same with textbooks as well.
Yeah, good point. This person says, I look at the thousands of other children in the eyes who have been harmed. Well, so what you're saying is the parents harmed their children? Because this was a parent decision.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy.
I'm not really sure.
I'm not following that.
I'm not. And it really, you could just take the improvement of outcomes, take that off the table. What's important here is freedom, is exercising freedom and choice. That's the point. And let the outcome be incumbent on those who made that decision. Right now, there's one decision maker. That's the government. And that's what this is all about, is trying to take that decision out of the hands of government and place it in the hands of the stakeholders. That would be the families of these children.
Yes, and you know what? We have freedom to grocery shop where we want to. I bet your listener I bet they shop at many different grocery stores. I bet they go to Walmart, Kroger, Sullivan's.
Yeah.
I know I do, because there's certain products at certain stores that I need, and that they don't sell at other stores. So I have the freedom to do that. We have the freedom to choose in any other entity in our lives and in our country except for education. And it really is. It's really crazy to think that you don't have that freedom.
Yeah, I totally agree. And that's what this is really the crux. And the underlying goal, that's why we call it education freedom. And those who say, well, they don't pay their taxes, well, think about this. They don't pay taxes to fund that, to have that choice, because a lot of people don't pay income taxes or pay a very low level, but they all pay sales taxes. And sales taxes are the major source of revenue to our state government. And what we typically talk about in terms of a school choice program is simply allowing the students' money allocated to them at the state level to be directed to the education setting of their choice. They're paying for it, no doubt about it. It's just, you're going to get the same series of objections.
But it's a series of tired objections,
I agree.
Right?
Long in the tooth.
Yes, I feel like parents have woken up and we're tired. We're tired of these false narratives and this fear mongering propaganda. We're tired of it, and we're speaking up.
Yeah, that's all there is to it. I don't, and this idea again that the goal here is to destroy public education. This is such a ruse. It's not the truth. The goal is to actually make it better.
Yes.
And knowing that they have a little competition, little competitive threat,
it kind of hurts some feelings, doesn't it?
It does, because they're accustomed to being protected, and when you're protected, the tendency is to get complacent. And complacency breeds mediocrity. What we're trying to do here is produce excellence.
Yes.
Competition produces excellence.
Amen.
And that's what we need to be doing. Well, hopefully our Senate in particular is paying attention to states like Texas.
I think they are.
That was a big deal
at this point,
big
right?
deal in Texas. Yeah, I think so, and I hope so. And we're going to keep pushing for it. It's the right thing to do. I believe, and so do a lot of other people believe that as well. How can you be opposed to freedom? I don't get that.
Well, if you're a true American, right? Like, that's what we're here for,
right? That's at the
right?
heart of this.
Yes.
We're going to keep working on it. We're going to get it
Let's
done.
do it.
And I'm so pleased to see that Texas has crossed the threshold, and it was not without a great deal of effort from a lot of people. And Governor Greg Abbott, he made it a priority, and he
sure
got
did.
it done.
He sure did. You know what happens in Texas doesn't always stay in Texas. So Mississippi, we are ready. Check us out at MississippiReady.org and follow us on all social media platforms.
That's Leah Ferretti, Director of Mississippi Ready. Thanks for coming in. Always
Thank
good
you,
talking
Gerard.
to you. Yep. We're stepping aside for a break. Coming right back with half an hour of Middays in the Element Wealth Studio.
Talking about you, but it all depends on what you do. It ain't too bad the way you using me, 'cause I sure am using you to do the things you do.
From the C.
We interrupt this program.
Gerard Gibert.
Here we go. This is huge news. Huge news. Huge. You need to listen to this.
Middays with Gerard. SuperTalk, Mississippi.
So there are strong opinions on this subject matter that we're seeing manifest on the C Spire text line. That's 601-879-4395. So I respect everybody's opinion. I don't necessarily agree with it, and I know they don't agree with us, and that's perfectly fine. I don't respect
everybody's opinion.
Well, how about I respect their right to express an opinion? All right, so let me rephrase that and turn that around a bit. Let's see, on the C Spire text line, our great senator from Greenwood, Mississippi, says school choice is a way to separate white and black. That's interesting. I do think that the biggest challenge we have to enabling school choice in Mississippi is race in the just the racial composition of our population. And what I mean by that is that the difference, the delta between the white and the black contingents of the population is the smallest of all 50 states. We're more close in terms of total composition between the two major races than all the other states. I do believe that dramatically complicates this issue. And it does kind of make you wonder that if there's not just an aversion, by some people that don't want certain people that look a certain way in their schools. It sure feels like that. Now, nobody's actually said that directly like that, but I'm not going to back away from that opinion that I have, that's kind of what drives the opposition to a great extent. And I have heard people say, oh my gosh, if we had school choice, we would be overwhelmed with the kids that come from XYZ school. Like, okay, well, is that a problem? But the bigger thing is that always gets overlooked, is that any reasonable school choice legislation that's been implemented anywhere typically includes some sort of control and latitude, discretion on the part of the receiving school. Hey, if we're full, we're full. And we just can't take. It's hard enough for us to keep up with the growing population moving into our district, much less take people from outside the district. That's legitimate. Now, when they start playing games with that reason for rejection, that becomes a different issue altogether. But the bill that Representative Owen, you recall, introduced this year, it had specific provisions of how the districts would be required to report their capacity before the open enrollment period would start, so there could be some transparency and accountability for decisions made. That's reasonable. But this idea that, what are we going to do when hundreds come from another school?
It's reasonable if you're being reasonable. If you're making bad faith arguments, then it's not going to be reasonable no matter what you say.
Okay, I'm with you. Yeah, the other objection you hear frequently is, it's going to drive down their property values. Well, how's that? Because this is the theory, I think, that they have that, again, supports that theory is that if students come from the poor performing schools and they transfer to better performing schools, that they're going to drag down the grades of those schools, which is essentially saying, well, all the students in the poor performing schools are perform poorly because of them, that if you put them in a different education setting, they would not thrive. And I submit that the students and the parents that would be by far the most likely to take advantage of open enrollment, for example, would be those that you want in your school, that are likely good students trapped in low-performing school environments and often are held back by just the overall low performance of the school. And often that stems from the teachers themselves and just the educational environment. Now, that's not to discount, and I've said this many, many times on the show, that a stable, functional home life, no doubt, is essential. It's not 100% alignment. Yeah, stable home life, nurturing home life produces better students and vice versa. No, it's not 100%. But I bet if you looked at the statistics there, Rhino, like you and I have many times on just the issue of crime and poverty, almost your prospect for struggling as an adult is exacerbated if you came from a dysfunctional, unstable home where you lack nurturing, you lack mentorship, you lack a father. I mean, that just proven statistically. Has been for decades. Nothing new. Also, so this person just says we're making poor points, blah, blah, blah. Districts hire one person to run copies, so multiple. So I'm not even going to read the rest of it. I just asked this question. So you say every single person working outside of the classroom in a school district, every single person is necessary. Every single one. Right? Because there have been comparisons done among our schools and overall monies and organizational structure with those in other states who, by the way, perform much better than we do. And yet, something else that I guarantee you could look at, and I've suggested this, and I'd love to see the legislature do it, is let's take the top performing school districts and schools in our, mainly the districts, because that's where a lot of the admin people are. Take those and just line them up side by side with the poor performing. You know what I bet you'd find, Rhino? That the poor performing districts have more costs going to administration, yet produce worse outcomes. I'm going to hazard a guess right there, and I bet I'm right on that. But wouldn't it make sense for the poor performing districts to maybe visit with the better performing districts and say, hey, what are you guys doing here? Just making it work. How come you're an A and we're an F or a D? And if they just say, oh, you just got better students than we do, well, that's a cop-out.
Welcome back to the not my problem.
Well, that's a good point. So I don't know. This person says we don't know what we're talking about.
Except I sent him a link to the National Library of Medicine, National Center for Biotechnology Information. It's a meta-analysis, the title of which, The Competitive Effects of School Choice on Student Achievement, a Systematic Review.
Right.
Where they went through 4,000 studies on school choice. They were able to find out of those 9,000 studies for school choice. Out of those, they found 400 that they had access to the full text of the study. Out of that 400, they were able to find 92 studies after weeding out a couple for being out of date or missing sample sizes. They found 92 that were transparent enough and with enough data that they could apply statistical meta-analysis to the results of those studies. So we're looking at the meta-analysis of 92 different studies on school choice's effectiveness. When you look at the school level, total effects studied, 686. Total number of positive effects, 378. Negative effects, 300. It's positive. You could argue it's a wash, but it's positive. Then you look at the student level. Again, this is 92 different studies on the effectiveness of school choice. The total effects studied, 1,502. You want to take a guess how many positive effects? That would be 990. Nearly two-thirds.
That's unbelievable.
So I refute you, naysayer, saying that all of the studies say it's negative.
I guess I'll say again.
I guess facts really are stubborn things.
The government is not responsible, in my view, from blocking people from making poor decisions. So if we give them the freedom to choose and they make a poor decision, so be it. They'll figure it out. Guarantee you. That didn't work very well. I got a worse outcome. I mean, is that not consistent with free markets? That's all we're trying to do is introduce freedom. Why are you opposed to freedom? Why are you so into protectionism? I couldn't live with that.
It's the way it's always been.
And I know, and that's the problem I have. So on the ceasefire text line, Louis from the 662 is a teacher, coach of 34 years. I'm concerned that school choice would basically lead to the transfer portal in high school where athletes are transferring strictly for athletic purposes. Will there be anything in place where parents will have to prove the need to transfer? No, I've never seen that proposed. And why is that a problem? I mean, I don't. And if there's a capacity issue, there's a capacity issue. If you start sort of handpecking, okay, we'll take that one. They can play sports. Oh, to you, we don't have any capacity. That would be a problem. That would be exposed, and there would be a stop put to it. Years ago, Louis goes on to say, we were voting on some proposition. I researched the state's top 10 and bottom 10 school districts, and by far the low-performing schools were getting more funding per student, but with a much higher percentage of the funding going to administrative costs. Well, you just proved the point I made there, Louis. Thank you. We're coming right back with the final segment.
Trust Cares. Gerard Gibert. Going beyond the headlines, breaking down the stories that matter to Mississippi. Middays with Gerard on SuperTalk Mississippi.
Welcome back, everyone. It's Middays. We're in the final segment. We've had an hour discussion on school choice, a very controversial issue in the state. And Mike from Columbus says low-performing schools. I was just talking about the contrast of operational expenses in a low-performing school or low-performing school in districts versus those that fare much better in that regard. He says low-performing schools have to pay more to attract administrators, teachers, staff, question mark, some of the higher expense, question mark. So it's not so much about that because, as we talked about earlier, the legislature sets the base pay for teachers, and that's by far the lion's share of the expenses. But there are a lot of costs that go not only to administrative staff, but just like I was saying earlier, I witnessed this myself, Rhino, selling early days of classroom technology, smart boards and the like. And we would always inquire, don't you guys want to buy some training to go along with this? Oh, no, we got it. And then, you show up on another project a year or two later, it's still sitting in the corner. Am I right about this?
Oh, yeah.
That's the problem. So that was like, wait, you spend 10, 15% more of the total procurement, and we're going to train your people so that they can start utilizing these assets immediately. Otherwise, they're just sitting there collecting dust. This isn't really a wise use of money. So that's an example. But the other question is not so much the pay, but just do we need all these positions? Do we need all these buildings? And you've seen some of that, man. We've got some extravagant facilities, and then we got some that are just deplorable. It's sad. And that, of course, to a great extent, is based on the local tax base, because that's where a lot of that money comes from. I just think, at a minimum, doesn't it make sense to look at the poor-performing districts and analyze them and contrast them to the high-performing districts across just a spectrum of metrics, organizational structure, pay, allocation of funding, inside the classroom, outside the classroom. I mean, there's a number of other, I'd have to think about it, but a number of points that could be analyzed as well and measured and scored. Just would make sense to do that. It's instructive. You learn more, from other people that are somewhat remote to you, that are in the same business, the same line of work. That's where you get.
And now the naysayers back. Almost all districts purchase training with technology. Stop with the misinformation. Stop telling the story that actually happened in your real life.
False.
This is what happens when you think you know everything and then try to spout it on the text line.
And it wasn't just, I'm not talking about just the advent of smart boards. By the way, I brought that technology. I'm going to tell you right now, to Mississippi, I brought it here. I introduced it into the education.
But that guy knows you better than you do.
In the 90s. Brought it in the 90s. But I'll tell you, in the early days of just outfitting with PCs, you just didn't sit down and use a PC like you do today. And it would just be sitting over there. You don't think that happens in government at all levels? All levels. Has that not been exposed recently? And the federal government in a huge way. Wait, you got 2,000 employees and 20,000 licenses for some piece of software you're not even freaking using. As an example, that's what we're talking about. So I don't understand why people are so hell-bent on protecting the status quo.
Because change is scary.
Yeah, embrace change. That was a guiding principle in my company. Embrace change. Hashtag embrace change. You can't deal with change, you can't work here. Simple as that. Because the one thing I can guarantee you is constant is change. Unbelievable. Thank you for reading the naysayers' text, but I also think that proved my point that there's no majority of citizens. Oh, we know that. There is a majority, Dave. Polls have shown that. And Dave said, I strongly disagree, but let me be clear. I'm not against it just as it is presented now. It's not universal school choice, and homeschooling has to be considered. It has been, Dave. You're wrong about that. Legislation has been introduced to do just that. Not in this session, but in the 24 and in prior sessions, phasing in, just like Arkansas did it, as an example. Now, Texas, by the way, they're all in year one. You've seen that. That's universal school choice this year, this dang year. And they allocated funds for that purpose. But I'm with you. I'd love to see universal school choice become a reality in Mississippi. But, gosh, just at a minimum. And I think it's also true that most people, Rhino, wouldn't you agree, they want their kids to go to the school in their district. They don't want to have to go find another school. And it is true that, in general, these school choice measures, they do not include transportation. That would be an additional expense, and that would have to be something absorbed by and dealt with by the family themselves. And that is, it precludes a lot of them from transferring, but a lot of them will figure it out, too. That's why we just got to give them the choice and let each family sort it out and make the best decision instead of government saying, oh, well, that doesn't work. You don't have any transportation. You don't know. I may figure it out. We're out of here today. Back with you tomorrow. Stay safe and God bless everyone.
A SuperTalk Mississippi media production.